All right, let's talk about the Titanic. I know, you think you know the story, but what if I told you there's a whole new theory that could change everything you thought you knew? Let's get into it.
For more than 100 years, right, the Titanic has been this epic story about man versus nature, human arrogance, and all that. But is that the whole story? Is it possible we've been missing a huge piece of the puzzle this whole time? So let's ask the big question. What really sank the unsinkable ship?
Look, we all know the official villain of the story, right? The iceberg. It's this giant, monolithic bad guy. But what if it wasn't working alone? What if the iceberg was just the accomplice? What if there was another killer hiding in plain sight? Okay, so let's get right into it. This is where it gets really interesting. We're going to explore a theory that suggests the whole disaster didn't start in the middle of the freezing Atlantic. Nope. It started weeks before, deep inside the ship, with a massive, smoldering fire.
So this idea comes from a journalist named Senan Maloney, and this guy has dedicated decades of his life to studying the Titanic. He argues that it's possible the iceberg hit the exact spot on the hull that had already been seriously weakened by a coal fire. Now, this isn't some wild guess. He's got some pretty compelling evidence to back it up. So what's the proof? Well, it all centers on these incredible photos that were discovered recently, taken before the Titanic even left port. And in one of them, you can clearly see this massive 30-foot-long black streak on the side of the hull. And guess where it is? Right where the iceberg hit. The theory is that this mark was caused by a fire in a coal bunker. A fire that was 3 stories high and had been burning for weeks. Think about that. A fire that hot could heat the ship's steel hull to over 1,000 degrees Celsius. That would basically cook the strength right out of it, making it super brittle and vulnerable, especially in those icy Atlantic waters. Okay, so whether the fire weakened the hull or not, the fact is the ship went down, and it went down fast. I mean, how does the state-of-the-art ship, the pinnacle of safety, sink in just 2 hours and 40 minutes? Well, the answer, tragically, was built right into its design. It's this thing that people call the ice cube tray flaw, and it's a perfect analogy. You see, the Titanic had these 16 watertight compartments. The idea was brilliant. It could stay afloat even if 4 of them flooded. But here's the fatal problem. The walls between them weren't sealed at the top. So picture an ice cube tray. As the front of the ship went down, water filled up one compartment and just spilled right over the top into the next one, and then the next one, and the next. It was this unstoppable chain reaction. Once it started, the ship's fate was sealed. And this timeline, wow, it just shows how fast everything fell apart. At 11:40 p.m., they hit the iceberg. Just over an hour goes by, and they're launching the first lifeboats. And get this, a lot of them are half empty. It's just chaos. And then by 2:20 a.m., less than 3 hours after impact, the unsinkable Titanic is gone, vanished beneath the waves. It's just incredibly fast. So beyond the steel and the ice, there's the human story. And this is where things get really intense. We're going to look at how your social class, your sense of duty, and just a few split-second decisions literally meant the difference between life and death. So you've got Captain Smith giving the order, women and children first. Seems simple enough, right? But check this out. You had 2 officers, one on each side of the ship, who heard that order completely differently. On the port side, Officer Lightoller took it to mean women and children only. He was actually sending lifeboats away with empty seats because there were no more women around. But on the other side, the starboard side, Officer Murdoch heard women and children first, meaning if there's space left over, men can get in. Think about that. Your chance of survival as a man could literally depend on which side of the boat you were standing on. And when you look at the numbers for the men who survived, it's a stark reminder of the class divide. 1/3 of the guys in first class made it. Not great, but compared to the others. And here's the really weird and tragic part. The men in second class had it the worst. Only 8% of them survived. That's even lower than third class, where 16% made it. It's just a grim reminder that where you were on that ship, what you paid for your ticket, played a massive role in whether you lived or died. But you know, amidst all that horror and chaos, you have these stories of incredible heroism. All 35 of the ship's engineers and electricians, they stayed below deck. They stayed at their posts as the water was rising, just to keep the lights on and the radio working, giving everyone else a fighting chance. Every single one of them was lost. And then you have the 5 postal clerks who died trying to save the mail, 400,000 pieces of mail. It's just an unbelievable display of duty. And it wasn't just the crew. You have these incredibly powerful personal stories. Take Ida Strauss.
Her husband co-owned Macy's. She had a spot on a lifeboat. She was safe. But she refused it. She turned to her husband, Isidore, and said, "We have been living together for many years. Where you go, I go." The last time anyone saw them, they were just sitting together in deck chairs, watching it all happen. And then there's the story of Benjamin Guggenheim, the wealthy industrialist. After he helped get women and children onto the lifeboats, he went back to his cabin. He and his valet changed into their absolute best evening wear. His reasoning? He wanted to go down like a gentleman. It's almost hard to believe, but it's a true story.
You know, it's these stories, these human moments of loss and incredible bravery, that's why this disaster still fascinates us so much. But the Titanic story doesn't end when it slips beneath the waves. It wasn't just a tragedy, it was a wake-up call. So the question is, what did we actually learn from losing more than 1,500 people? And how does it still affect us now?
Well, the impact was huge. The sinking sent shockwaves across the globe and forced a total rethink of safety at sea. The very first international safety convention, what we now call SOLAS, was created because of this. And that led to all sorts of things we take for granted now. The International Ice Patrol, the folks who track icebergs, mandated 24/7 radio watches on ships, and maybe the biggest one of all, a new rule that said every ship must have enough lifeboat space for every single person on board. These rules born from this one disaster are still saving lives today. And that brings us right back to the beginning, to that fire. We've always thought of the Titanic as this story of a freak accident, just a terrible, unlucky run-in with an iceberg. But if that fire theory is true, if the ship was already seriously damaged before it even left the dock, then you have to ask yourself, was it really an accident? Or was this tragedy in some way inevitable from the start?